Hails and salutations to any denizen of the intertubes that stumbles across this long, overdue video. I think my last real video post was over a year ago, and no, in the face of any speculation that I may have been assassinated by an Elon Musk goon squad, the boring explanation is, well, life just got in the way, and I'd been pursuing other endeavors, so to speak. But I'm finally back with a long-promised and long-overdue rant regarding Tekken 8 Season 2 and its potentially jettisoned into the sun future, given what we know about the looming Season 3 patch. Hey everyone, I am Necropants, and this is another rant. Welcome to the utter state of Tekken 8 Season 2, and yet another day in the mental asylum of the Milky Way. As Season 2 draws to a close, and we hang in fair sphincter-clenched suspense on what Season 3 might bring, it's time I weighed in on the state of the game and if there's any hope at all for us, or if we are simply doomed under the iron fist of the current Tekken team's reign of incompetence. Just a brief disclaimer. I had intended to make a well-edited video visually showcasing my concerns and issues with the game, but as I feel the release of Season 3 creeping up, I probably wouldn't get this video out in time due to having the editing skill of a deformed monkey with no arms. So this will probably mostly just be a rant video with some mid-gameplay and random Tekken footage for the most part, so you can probably just listen to this as you take your annual dump while you ponder how much you hate me as you forge it. Also, before I begin, I should advise, I pretty abruptly stopped playing ranked in this game in both seasons due to an abundance of rage quitting in Season 1 and no punishment for doing so, even having win streaks broken by people who plugged on me, and just in general cheaters in Season 2. And I really prefer the deathmatch first to 10 format, and absolutely hate the developers went with a 2-match rank matchmaking, regardless of outcome situation. At least make it first to 2 or ideally 3 Namco. So I've mainly been playing quick match with maximum search parameters. So I'd say I hold my own against Tekken God Destruction players relatively often, and pull out perfect electrics from abolishing fist out my ass pretty frequently. I also should state that I use a mod on PC called Tranquility that turns off some of the UI features to engage a kind of streamer mode that obfuscates a lot of the player information. First, I'm not going to do a review of the Season 1 game proper, since I have done that before on this channel, and I largely stand by it. But as I am a man of my word, I must finally weigh in on the inclusion of one Heihachi Mishima at the end of Season 1's DLC that I promised but never addressed. So, post-nut clarity spoiler warning, although I would question your sanity if you care at this juncture. In Tekken 7, the entire hype around the game was they were finally bringing the Mishima feud storyline to a close. After 7 main entries, we were promised that either Heihachi or Kazuya would meet their end, which culminated in Kazuya throwing his father's lifeless body into the mouth of a volcano, cutscene and all. Final molten death. And yes, I realize Heihachi has survived multiple explosions, falls, and general homicidal beatings, but you would think going for a complete lava bath should be somewhat final. Although the final chapter, quote-unquote, was presented atrociously in the game's narrative, I found it ultimately a fitting end to a 25-year-plus saga of which the developers like to curiously brag as the longest ongoing storyline in video games. Now, I have to qualify what I'm about to say somewhat. Heihachi is actually one of my favorite characters. In my opinion, he should always be a playable character on the roster, in every Tekken game. However, I simply do not understand the developer's narrow mindset here. Once revealed that he was in fact not dead again, they dropped their cojones and backtracked, saying that for the 30th anniversary, it didn't feel right for Heihachi not to be there, so they brought him back. Okay, fine. But you could have done that and had him in the game and playable, but still dead in the canon story, much like his wife before him in Tekken 7, instead of wimping out like total bitches that you are and creating the most nonsense backtrack garbage unnecessary story DLC retcon in such a ridiculously absurd manner, which must rank up there with as one of their most pathetic lore moves in Tekken franchise history. And if you know Tekken lore with its fighting bears, psychopathic robots, genetically engineered boxing dinosaurs, cyborg kickboxers, and chainsaw-wielding fembots, the fact that this surpasses everything in pure absurdity is really saying something. Hell, I'm one of the very few people on this planet that actually see some worth in the Tekken franchise storyline over the years, and the problem has always been in the in-game execution of that storyline. At the conclusion of the main story for Tekken 8, I thought that Kazuya probably should have beaten Jin, simply due to the fact that everyone just seemed to let this known war criminal get away with murder, and having him lose may be a way to further his redemption arc, instead of, hey guys, I'm the good boy now, and everyone just accepting it in 5 seconds flat. How it stands, it could have set up an awkward situation with Miguel in the future, for example, due to Jin murdering his sister in cold blood at her very own wedding. And if he does, it's lame. Oh hey, maybe that's why we've yet to see him make an appearance in this game. And if he does finally return, they will just do an AEW wrestling booking move and just pretend that it never happened at all. The Tekken 8 campaign narrative was good enough. I was satisfied to a degree, and it wasn't as terrible as it was presented in Tekken 7 with that awful narrator. In fact, I think it's way better than Mortal Kombat 1's campaign. But then this garbage-free DLC dropped, and if NetherRealm had not stepped up to the plate with that terrible New Age garbage they shat out as an expansion, I may have had to relent on that particular opinion. Yes, I was one of the only Tekken story defenders, and well done, Namco, you have even turned me against you and changed that forever. With this extended chapter magical monk amnesia limp-wristed Heihachi caught mid-air from a super monk who just so happened to be waiting conveniently somehow at the bottom of a fucking volcano to catch your dead ass and spirit you away to his friends at the cult of Heihachi for your resurrection. Absolute nonsense. Anyway, now that crash out's out of the way, how are things going with the rest of the game then? So I initially praised Tekken 8 in my earlier review as being somewhat of the total package as far as fighting games go. A big launch roster of over 30 characters, nice presentation, track mode and individual character ending videos, a substantial story campaign, serviceable netcode with fast matchmaking and load times, excellent revolutionary replay feature, including takeover of that replay, which is something I've wished for years, leaderboards, social hub, Tekken Ball, an excellent practice mode with an online search, tutorials, an arcade campaign, and almost every mode that's ever existed in the franchise history outside Tekken Force. And no, before you say anything, the Muso-style chapter or two you can play in the campaign doesn't count. And of course, Team Battle. Oh, and Treasure Mode. Ghost Mode, while being a nice idea, just doesn't really seem to work, considering I've tried training my characters multiple times and they always forget after a few days and go back to being brain-dead idiots. It would have helped if they had made this a proper treasure battle mode as well, with rotating stages and coupled that together. But all that aside, the point is the default package was good, probably the most fully featured fighting game to that date, and it only required some simple changes to make it incredible. Things like allowing game search in any mode, online game search, and clean up the rampant rage quitting and pluggers in online games with actual penalties for the toxic player base, something we all thought was already promised after their abysmal failure in ranked mode in Tekken 7, and to this day I still don't really know if that's really been addressed, despite them saying it was, because I haven't come across a rage quitter since, but I think that might reflect more the diminishing and hardcore population that remain and not the casual players who have long since moved on. But the real problem was the core fighting. Oh, before I go ahead, the jukebox feature was also good. But the real problem was the core fighting system. The new additions of heat, chip damage, ridiculously aggressive base gameplay that punished you for blocking, and heavily awarded spammy plus frame 50-50 looping offense with massive combos and every character being homogenized in this regard with simplified inputs across the board and wildly incomprehensible balance decisions regarding the risk and raw reward of moves. One thing of note, for example, that annoys me greatly and to no end is giving all the Mishimas Kazuya's special 13-frame electric. Similar to how Ken and Ryu use different Dragon Punch mechanics in a way, in Tekken traditionally Kazuya had a special electric command which allowed the input to be a tad faster than his family members, allowing him to unlock highly technical counter-hit properties on Abolishing Fist, as well as superior block punishment, if you were good enough to use it. Now every Mishima has this, taking away the very thing that made him stand out and be different. And don't get me started on the things that were done, like Easy Slide and DSS stance on Law. They basically made a pass on the entire roster and dumbed them down, removing the fun out of the game in the name of pursuing a casual audience who frankly don't care and practically don't exist either. I gave them the benefit of the doubt since, after all, this is their first title without an extended arcade beta period, and figured with all the data of people around the world playing the game, they were one big balance pass away from the best Tekken game ever made. And so I waited, as we all did, for the Season 2 patch. As in various development chats, as we were promised, a big revamp of the game, new moves, and most importantly, improved defensive options, and a normalization of the heat mechanic and significantly reduced chip damage with a buff to sidesteps and movement. We were all wary, but hopeful and excited for a more normalized Tekken experience. Then the patch dropped, right into our collective horrified upturned mouth and eye sockets. Yes, sidesteps were buffed, quite nicely actually, allowing much needed counterplay and how, in my opinion, sidestepping should have been for quite a while now. Neutral high power crush heat engaging moves lost heat, and frame advantage on heat engages nerfed on hit. Or did that come a little later? I actually forget. But anyway, an otherwise conservative patch that did a lot to nerf a bunch of characters' most egregious, abusable moves, but ultimately not going far enough, especially since every character appeared to now have included ridiculously perfect attacks with mid-screen range, plus on block, or safe bullshit with practically no counterplay and homing properties, not looking at anyone, Zafina. A patch, by the way, that killed any remaining desire for me to continue playing that character specifically, by the way, completely nullifying anything they had done to improve the defensive elements of the game. I think it's safe to say that now it's regarded as the worst patch in series history. Steam reviews bombed to overwhelmingly negative. Community outrage was massive. Review bombing, quit threats, pros publicly ditching or boycotting the game, people going to play Street Fighter, etc. And beleaguered developer Harada, who has unfortunately since retired, that must say a lot. Harada even admitted on Twitter, quote unquote, "I personally do not think this backlash is at all unjustified," and acknowledged a disconnect between what the community wants and the tuning results. Now, if you know anything about Japanese companies, this sort of apology is unheard of, so things are really bad. We got an emergency patch mid-April, damage scaling revisions to curb combo inflation, tweaks to high reward, low risk tools, and later patches throughout the mid-2025 continued gradual rollbacks. But the launch damage had lingered, and many of the developers doubled down on aggression and spent months undoing it. But as we now live in the live service world, and you've got developers such as Grinding Gear Games who are running 2 live service games and frequently update their titles for free, it always seems that the Tekken team are just, behind the times and dragging their feet so much. I get the impression they just don't know what to do. As if people already were annoyed that they removed the chicken counter system that's always existed in Tekken, and that was not enough, which I am one of those people. In this new team's inherent wisdom, they also decided Key Charge would no longer guarantee a counter hit, in a lazy carpet bomb solution to resolving the odd character that had an abusable setup with it. Instead, if maybe just fixing that character's situation, no, just nuke another fun system that's always been in the franchise and had a few niche uses for certain characters, and it was nuked into complete worthlessness. There were a bunch of other little tweaks and system changes, such as making the rank system way easier with more ranks at the high end, while refusing to fix the actual problems of cheaters. But outside of the rest, paled in comparison to this nonsensical tone-deaf bunch of changes, which appeared to indicate the entire Namco team had been replaced by a bucket of common garden slugs. With every decent, well-thought-out change, there were 5 inconceivably retarded ones. It almost felt like the balancing team had inherited some mass form of bipolar disorder where every good change was counterbalanced by the worst thing possible and completely nullified anything good in the patch. Maybe the most baffling was changes to the throw system where they decided it was a good idea to give throw breaks chip damage, along with a series of absurd changes to throw tracking. They did thankfully have the sense to relent on the chip damage change since the backlash was so universally brutal. The response was swift and overwhelming, and the community crashed out, and rightfully so. So, as mentioned before, an emergency patch was deployed, setting out to mitigate the damage of maybe the biggest community backlash Tekken had ever received. Health was increased to 200, which drew criticism at the time that this would destroy the poking game. But I felt wasn't really accurate in this environment. It would at least be a somewhat compensatory move in a game which had such high damage in two-touch situations. More universal heat changes, such as making heat bursts mostly sidesteppable and resolving a few insanely broken chip damage loops, and a balanced pass in some cases reducing risk-reward of removes, and hilariously in some cases making newly added moves practically redundant. Kazuya's human form up forward 1, for example. As expected, the community expected way more than this. The development team were criticized for being out of touch with the game and too slow and conservative with the corrections, as I mentioned just before, and the game began to bleed player numbers drastically. About a month later, another patch dropped, adding more pointless ghost mode system improvements, failing to acknowledge the core functionality being broken, and further heat burst global tracking nerfs, doubling down on ghost mode updates as June encroached upon the community, and we got more angry and frustrated and more anxious. For many, it was do or die for the Tekken game at this point. In July, they finally backtracked on the absolute ridiculous decision to make rage arts safer, and now we're globally minus 18, making everyone full combo punishable as it should have been from the start, along with a bunch of balance updates to specific characters and removing some ridiculous properties of new moves. But as the trend developed, all received as a step in the right direction, but simply not enough. This trend continued with balance patches drying up, while Namco fielded the excuse of not wanting to disrupt major tournaments, while leaving egregious new characters like Anna relatively untouched as tier whores around the world dominated with her. Meanwhile, the community Tekken talks completely dried up due to the team not wanting to face the heat of the community upon receiving a lot of criticism about it being used to sell Jin Kazama, body pillows and Kazuya watches, and culminated in a very poorly received mini-doc about the producer Mike Murray traveling to Thailand. Was he director? Sorry, director. Travel to Thailand to see how much of an effort they put into character designs, also poorly received, and was later spotted on Twitter admitting they probably won't do that again because of the response. And then Katsuhiro Harada, long-time director since Tekken 3 and relatively beloved character in the gaming world overall, announced his departure from Namco, much to the shock and sadness of many people regardless of the state of the game in the community, including myself. I guess trotting out the old "don't ask me for shit" gag doesn't quite work in this incandescent landscape. So here we are on the precipice of Season 3. The developers have pretty much been radio silent until its recent announcement. Tekken needed drastic patches this season and continuous updates. Hell, maybe it even needed a beta build of the game for us to give feedback on. Yet it seems like they can barely cast off the shackles of their arcade roots and remain a relic of the past, and the game has suffered because of it. Many of us speculated if Season 3 was going to occur at all. It is well known the game sold 2 million copies in the first 2 weeks, but crawled to the 3 billion mark when we finally got another sales update from Namco over a year later. It's no surprise they dumped an extreme amount of money into this game for a fighter, including ridiculous adverts with thousands of people locked down in major city centres. But it was finally announced, and the new cast for Season 4 was revealed practically in full. And I guess they wanted to load up the disappointment up front, since pretty much no one outside a few Kunimitsu gooners and the odd Bob-playing weirdo are happy. Roger Jr. the kangaroo was met with a cheer, which I actually interpret as more of a massive sigh of relief that the Australian resident was not Marduk, who everyone probably rightly speculate would be horrifying in this system. Although I can't help but wonder when people face Roger Jr. they may wish it was actually Marduk ploughing them instead. Hell, it looks like, looking at this lineup, this is the Frame Whisperer season. Hell, are they that desperate to get you back, Frame? A ray of hope, however, when the real promised the back-to-basics approach to the game for Season 3, signalling a return to refined, deliberate gameplay with less extreme offense and defensive swings. The spark of hope was reignited once again, but by now we have all been collectively burned by this spark before, if not utterly betrayed by it. So this did nothing much but turn up the volume of anxiety. No mention of new systems or system changes, very concerning. In Tekken 7 we had some pretty major updates, especially in Season 2, which added new stuff, but this was all absent here. Are they this scared now? Along with very vague language that gives me the impression of a too conservative or corpse speak, or a team that just doesn't really have any idea what to do with the game and is so terrified to make the changes necessary. Well, that brings us relatively up to speed, and I should end things here before it drags on. I have ranted and raved enough. Thanks for watching, and if indeed you still are, make sure to not like this video, don't subscribe, and definitely do not share this video. I will try and address the recent development posts regarding the Season 3 in another video shortly, because, oh boy, it's curious indeed. If I can make it before the release date on Tuesday. But until then, this has been another necromantic rant, and I will now depart back into the void.